Sometimes it comes down to the offer itself. So for example, you're getting lots of people reaching out, but the people you're attracting are people who just want something for free. And so you're giving
Right.
away a bunch of free stuff, but those free, conversions aren't turning into sales. So in that kind of scenario, it's a matter of, okay, well, maybe we should test not offering a free trial or reducing what it is we're giving away for free. And that will usually reduce the number of leads you're getting. So it could look painful initially, like, oh, our cost per lead just skyrocketed. But if you actually are turning more, if you're actually then relevant to the people who are willing to pay, we actually were able to significantly cut our ad spend in Q4 of that year, I think by like 30-40% year over year, and still saw a significant growth in revenue and over 1,000% growth, I think, in profit, because we were able
Wow.
to weed out the things that just weren't working. And it was really exciting to see the profit
Wow.
numbers in there and be like, okay, year over year, over 1,000% increase. That's pretty sweet.
Hey everyone, today I have John Horn from Stub Group, a digital advertising agency which has served hundreds of clients to solve the complex questions all businesses face in the ever-changing world of digital marketing. John, thank you for coming into the Offshore Marketer Show. And how's it going?
It's going great. I've been looking forward to our conversation. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So John, perhaps you can tell me a bit more about yourself and the history of Stub Group, so the listeners and the viewers can get a bit of information.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stub Group, we've been around for about a decade at this point, close to a decade. And from the very beginning, we were very specific in what we wanted to do, which was to help businesses with their digital advertising online. And how we kind of got into that space is back in the day, our two co-founders who started the company, they both came from marketing backgrounds, and they could see this change in the marketplace, which had already happened to some extent, but was still happening at that point, with businesses shifting from traditional advertising to digital advertising and needing help, needing guidance in making that transition, and then in figuring out just how to live in this online world, which, as you
Sure.
know, is constantly changing. Every day is a
Sure.
new algorithm change or a new platform that's an option. And so we started, back in the day, to help businesses figure out how to create and run successful, profitable advertising campaigns online through platforms such as Google and Facebook and others. And we've kept at it until today.
Awesome. Awesome. And in terms of you, what made you so interested in the actual digital marketing world?
So I think there's a couple things that are really interesting to me. I love communication. I love writing. Certainly has always been a passion of mine, but just the concept of how do you communicate thoughts and ideas in a compelling way in the advertising space, usually in a very, with a lot of parameters where you're attempting to communicate information about a product or a service in a business and explain to a potential customer why your business or your product is the right solution for their needs. So that's very interesting to me, just that process of communicating and reaching out to potential customers through advertising. And then also really one of the fun things about being in the agency world is the variety of businesses that we get to work with. So many different business models, so many different markets, different types of people we get to work with and see, oh, hey, this works really well, or oh, that's not working well, or hey, I didn't know you can make money doing that, but you can. That's fantastic. Let's figure out how to market that. So it's always, every day is a new adventure, and that I enjoy that.
That's great. So I mean, I understand that Stub Group is a premium partner with Google, with Facebook, and also Amazon, if I understood correctly. What does that mean specifically? I mean, do you have access to information that a lot of people not being a partner do, or maybe what does that actually mean?
Yeah, great question. So focusing in specifically on the Google side of things, we have, like you mentioned, what they call a premier Google partner status. Basically, what that is Google looks at all the different agencies and businesses who manage advertising for clients on Google. And they have a very large program called Google Partners, where there's lots of different agencies who, get that status based upon, hey, having spent a certain amount of ad spend and different criteria like that. And then Google takes a very small percentage of those Google partners and ranks those as what they call premier Google partners. And they look at a number of
Okay.
things. They look at, what's your retention rate for your clients? Are your clients happy? Are you meeting best practices? Are you staying up to date with the new changes Google's rolling out? Things like that. And what that allows us to do for our clients is it gives us access to much more advanced support at Google. If there's issues we need to help get figured out or dig into things, gives us access to things like betas and information about new features coming out that we can try on behalf of our clients. And it gives us access to a dedicated team at Google who is proactively working with us to figure out how can we help our clients be more successful? How can we help them grow? How can we best leverage Google's tools and options to perform best for our clients? So yeah, a lot of benefits to come to our clients by us being able to be in that space.
That's wonderful, actually. I mean, some people put out numbers specifically on Facebook, and I think I was part of a copywriting group at some point on Facebook, and it was saying like Facebook will give you full support or dedicated line of when you have accounts above like $10 million. I don't even know. It's probably per year, I guess, in ad spend. So I guess it's kind of the same thing when you do that with Google, or probably less, I would guess.
Yeah, similar concept with Google, and the amount of ad spend is one thing they look at, but then also too, it's other tangibles like retention rate, like best practice adoption, because Google wants to make sure that the partners they're kind of endorsing or giving this status to are doing a very good job for their clients, not just spending a bunch of money, but also stewarding that money well.
Yeah, sure. Now, as far as like Stub Group, what are the particular problems that you're trying to resolve as an agency per se?
I think one problem that is always around and will continue to be around is the idea of how do you track and measure performance? How do you report back to clients, hey, this is where we spent your dollars and here's what it drove for you in return. And that is in many ways a beauty of digital advertising as opposed to many offline advertising methods, because there is so much more you can track online and you can be so much more targeted, of course, in who you reach out to. But even there's still gaps in that data. There's still realities that we're dealing with right now when it comes to the iOS 14 updates and how that has impacted the tracking landscape. And as Google and all really the big platforms push away from cookies, move into this cookieless world, figure out other ways to track success online. And so that's something that we're investing lots of time and energy into and working with our clients to figure out how do we keep tracking to the best of our abilities to let our clients know exactly where their dollars are going, and then also be able to spend them more effectively by seeing, hey, this is working well. It's good, positive ROI. This isn't, let's adjust the ad dollars accordingly.
Right. I've heard a rumor so Facebook came around recently with, apart from actually being in any marketing role, I'm actually part of the financial role. And Facebook came around very recently with bad quarter results, and one of them, I think one of the issues that, apart from losing users for the first time, was the impact of the iOS 14. There's a rumor I've seen that Apple is paying Google about $10 billion a year, so that kind of, for Google to be their preferred search engine on the phones. Can you confirm as being a Google partner? And just
Yeah, well, Google pays Apple a lot of money to have Google as the default search engine on Safari for sure, and that's been a deal they've been re-upping on a regular basis for a long time. And I forget the exact number of billions, but it is a large number.
I'm sure.
Absolutely,
I'm sure.
And it's been interesting. Google has not been as impacted as Facebook by the change, or at least from what we've seen. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that with Facebook, obviously they're not a search engine. They're very reliant upon figuring things out by people based upon how those people are interacting with the Facebook platform, but also B, how they've been interacting with all the other different apps and websites that the Facebook pixel is installed on. Whereas with Google, they still have a lot of first party data where you go type your search into Google. Well, you've just told Google what you're interested in right now.
Right.
And so especially with, let's say, the search and shopping, products that Google has, they haven't seen nearly the same impact as Facebook has seen because their models are different.
So then my next question is, when should I be using Google as ads versus when should I be using Facebook ads to get clients, an example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a question we get asked frequently by businesses who are reaching out looking to hire us and look for our expertise. And there's a couple different things that we typically look for to say, hey, this platform might be better to start with, or that platform maybe better to start with. Part of it has to do with, are people searching for the product or service that you sell? In other words, is this something that you're solving a need? People are searching for the need. And so you can go after search queries with Google Ads and say, hey, here's the solution to your problem. Or are you needing to create awareness? For example, let's say you're an event and you need to notify people that, hey, this exhibit is going to be at this place at this time. Well, people don't know to search for that. So Google search is probably not going to be a great place to be. In that case, you would want to go after, let's say, Facebook or Instagram or some place where you can identify people who are interested in art. Let's say it's an art exhibit. They're interested in art. And so you can say, okay, hey, let's make these people aware that this exhibit is going to take place. So I think that's a big thing to figure out is, are people searching for it, or are you just trying to create brand awareness? And then also just, looking at the conversion funnel for your ads and thinking through, is this something that people are going to make an immediate decision to purchase, or are we going to need to, keep reminding them, keep nurturing them over a long period of time? With Facebook, you can build lists, you can maybe get them into a funnel with a free offer, a free ebook or giveaway or something like that. And then you can nurture that relationship over time through both email marketing as well as additional Facebook ads. So that can be a good fit. Whereas, with Google search, maybe, you can use that as an entry point as well, but then use Facebook to remarket to those people. So those are, a few of the different things that we'll take a look at when we're trying to answer that question for a client.
And in terms of being compliant and staying out of the Google jail, as they say, what's been perhaps some strategies that you've, I guess, created, recreated, and continuously used upon even today? And obviously, Google and Facebook are always changing, but specifically for Facebook, there's a lot of changes, I guess almost daily at this point. I'm not even sure. But what's been perhaps the strategies that you help with clients actually get them out of not getting their account suspended or banned or whatever?
Yeah. Google jail, I like referring to it that way. It's a very real thing. Account suspensions, that's what Google calls it, where they will say that for whatever reason, an advertising account has violated their policies and will not be allowed to show ads. That website can't, serve ads moving forward. Sure. And that is a terrifying thing, frankly, to see as an advertiser, because so many businesses are dependent upon Google for so much of their business, given that it's how customers find solutions to problems these days. We go to Google. That's usually the first place. And so we've built up here at Stub Group over the years a lot of experience and understanding of Google's policies, how to stay compliant with them, how to fix issues if you have accidentally violated policies, or if the system has incorrectly flagged your account for something you didn't actually do. So we work through this with a lot of clients. And a couple things that you can do to proactively try to stay out of that is be very clear on your website about all of your policies. So for example, if you're in the e-commerce space, you need to make sure people understand what's your shipping policy, what's your refund policy, what's your return policy, things like that, so that you are creating a very, for lack of a better word, a comfortable environment in which people can place an order where they know exactly what's going on and the information is consistent.
Sure.
Because on Google's end, what they don't want, of course, are fly-by-night operators who are just trying to take advantage of people. Because the more of those that exist, if Google is facilitating people getting to those businesses, Google loses trust in the eyes of consumers because they're like, well, I got there through Google and I got scammed. And so Google's very, paranoid about that. So you want to make sure you've got all your policies in place. You want to have things like privacy policy in place, so that you're taking care of legal requirements in terms of informing people of how you're using their data and what kinds of tracking codes or things you use on your website. And you also want to be very consistent in your advertising. And let's say, for example, your business names on your website. I've seen trouble pop up when maybe there's, DBAs, a client has a doing business name as, and maybe they've got one name on their ad account, one name on their website, and it starts to get confusing. And Google's like, well, who's actually advertising? Who's running? What business is this? This looks fishy. Things like that. A lot of common sense things as far as thinking through what's good for the people on my website. Let's make sure it's all laid out and fleshed out, and that will help to make Google happy as well. And then also just things like make sure your website's always working. Don't use redirects on your website. Make sure your ads follow Google's policies, that you're not trying to game the system or have multiple accounts for the same business. Things like that. There's a lot of common sense things that go into it. And then a lot of nuances that, unfortunately, advertisers often don't figure out until after they've been suspended and they start looking for help from someone like Stub Group.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely. I actually got at some point. I don't even remember why I got my Facebook ad account banned, and I had to recreate another one. It's like I was thinking, what have I done? I don't even remember. It was like 3 years ago. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
No, but it's always a very painful situation. And it was not even, it was for something, I think it was just playing around with this. Anyway, so looking at the analytical side of things, whether you use either Google, Facebook, even Amazon, what kind of data? You said you use a lot of tracking. What kind of data helps you make better decisions, either for your clients or yourself, to understand if the actual process of placing the ad is working? Can you share a bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we want to understand how are people reaching a client's website and how are they behaving on the website. And for most of our clients, we'll use Google Analytics to identify a lot of that information. It's a great tool, a free tool right now. We're in the process of figuring out to what extent do we need to switch to the new GA4 tool, which is kind of the newest iteration of what used to be called Universal Analytics, which still exists. And so there's changes in process there that Google's working on. But we use that a lot to understand how people are using the website. And then we use things such as call tracking. We have a call track system we work with. So for our clients who want to get phone calls from people who reach the website, we're able to track and say, here's exactly how many calls you got. Here's recordings of the calls. We'll monitor them to see, are these the types of calls you want to get? How many were relevant, how many weren't? And we'll get that information back into the advertising platforms as well, so we can optimize based upon which campaigns are driving relevant phone calls, as an example. And then also to as much as we can, we try to integrate with the client's backend data. So if they have a CRM, for example, we want to understand not just how are people interacting with things on the website, but then what happens after a lead comes in, for example. Are those leads turning into customers? How much revenue are those customers worth? Are there types of campaigns where they're great at driving leads, but those leads are all tire kickers and they're not turning into customers? And so maybe it looks like we have a great cost per lead, but the cost per acquisition is terrible. And try and really dig into that data with clients and look under the hood and make bigger picture decisions about where we're spending their ad dollars and what messaging we're using in our ads, for example, so that we're driving as efficient ROI as possible.
And so in a situation that the actual conversions are kind of, as you just mentioned as the example, you had a lot of leads, but they're just kicking the tires. Or maybe in a past experience, what have you done in practical terms that actually moved the actual wheel to get better conversions? What can you give us like an example per se?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it comes down to the offer itself. So for example, I can think of scenarios where you're offering a free trial of something, or hey, a free month of management, something like that. And you're getting lots of people reaching out, but the people you're attracting are people who just want something for free. And so you're giving
Right.
away a bunch of free stuff, but those free, conversions aren't turning into sales. So in that kind of scenario, it's a matter of, okay, well, maybe we should test not offering a free trial or reducing what it is we're giving away for free. And that will usually reduce the number of leads you're getting. So it could look painful initially, like, oh, our cost per lead just skyrocketed. But if you actually are turning more, if you're actually then relevant to the people who are willing to pay and who are looking less at, do they have a free offer, but more of, okay, what's the credibility of this company? And, is this product or service exactly what I need? Then you can start to see a better, cost per acquisition from that. So I think that's one thing. Also, certainly targeting, plays a role as well. You can identify categories of keywords where you realize, okay, people searching for this, they're not in a place yet where they're ready to make a purchase. They're, still in that tire kicking phase, and we should either decrease our bidding, for example, so that we can spend less on spend less per lead or spend less per click on that space, or maybe we should just stop advertising there entirely and focus on the more lower hanging fruit where the people have kind of gone through that education process and they're ready to make a purchase.
Interesting. And talking about the ROAS, in your experience, what's been a good ratio, at least to start, for a new business that is looking to launch their advertising campaign? I mean, I've seen 5-to-1, 2-to-1, 10-to-1. But I mean, what's been like, let's say, I'll give you perhaps an example. A client comes around. She is in a cosmetic markets. She created her own, for the sake of her own deodorant, like something that is new, something is natural, all these things. She has about 2 to 5K, but she has never done advertising. Perhaps what would be, to start with, a good ratio of her doing, getting some return on her ads?
You will probably hate my answer, but it just so much depends that what I say in that case is I'll typically say, what is a good ROAS? It completely depends on your situation and your numbers. So let's dig into it. So in that example you gave, I want to sit down with them and understand, what are your margins? How much profit are you making from an order?
Right.
Because that's massively important, figuring out where's your break-even point. And then figure out too, what are your goals? Is your goal to break into the market and capture market share and grow as fast as you can, get as many customers as fast as you can? Because if so, we're going to target a lower return on ad spend, where you might even break even or lose money initially, because your goal is to capture market share and then make money from them long term. Whereas if you're in a position where you say, no, I need to be making profit as quickly as possible, maybe it's just we're not trying to capture tons of market share, just pay the bills right now and kind of grow things slowly, then we would want to target a higher return on ad spend. Again, factoring in the profit margin, other costs, to figure out what's going to work for them.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. In terms, I've also seen a lot of bidding strategies. This is a new universe for me. So how can CPM or CPC or CPA be important depending on your goal? And what is the difference on why should I focus on CPM versus cost per click, or even cost per acquisition, I believe. So what would be per let's say per term, what would be each goal, so that perhaps our listeners and viewers can understand a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So start with CPM. So CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions. There's a couple different places you would use that. Typically, you're going to use that more if your goal is in brand awareness. You're trying to get in front of as many eyeballs, as many relevant eyeballs as possible. Then often you might end up using a CPM model. And that would be typically more on, let's say, the Facebook, Instagram side of things. Google doesn't really have many options on the CPM side, maybe a little bit with YouTube, but that's about it. So in terms of actually setting, targeting or a goal of CPM, that's where it would be. Now, you can also use it as a metric to kind of get a gauge for how your ads are performing across different platforms. So it can be interesting to look at Google, for example, and say, oh, my CPM for YouTube is X and on Facebook it's Y. And you might say, okay, well, I'm actually, getting in front of more people at the same cost on YouTube. So let's spend more money there. Again, if kind of reach and views is your primary goal. Cost per click, of course, is what you spend per click, per person clicking on your ad. And that, again, is more of a signal that gets to that third point of cost per acquisition. Because with cost per click, you might spend, let's say, $10 for a Google search click for something, and you might pay, let's say, $1 for a Facebook click for that same thing. But if your Google conversion rate is at least 10 times as high as your Facebook conversion rate, is still going to equal out to the same cost per conversion or a better cost per conversion. So I don't really focus on the cost per click as a metric in and of itself. I focus on the bottom line metric of, given my conversion rate, given my target cost per acquisition, how does cost per click play into that? And then, of course, with cost per acquisition, that's kind of ultimately my goal is, what is it costing me to get a new customer? And even beyond that too, if different customers are worth different amounts, I want to look at return on ad spend, because if a customer is worth $10 and a customer is worth $100, well, the looking at the same target cost per acquisition for both those customers would be misleading. One might be very profitable and one might be very unprofitable based upon the value of that conversion. So those are all things I look at. But when it comes to bidding, Google in particular is really pushing towards conversion-based bidding strategies. So target cost per acquisition, target return on ad spend, maximize conversions. And that's a great thing, because obviously we want Google to be focused on what is driving value for us.
Right.
What becomes important there, though, is that we're actually feeding correct and comprehensive data to Google, which comes back to that whole conversion tracking side of things. Because if you're giving the wrong data to Google or incomplete data, and then you're relying upon Google to use one of these conversion-based bidding strategies, you can quickly optimize yourself to a point where you're not getting any orders, or you're getting the wrong types of orders. And that's where, working with experts to work in tandem with those bidding strategies is really important.
Interesting. And you also, I guess you also do a lot of keyword research. And what's been, let's say, a research that actually improved to make a real difference on the ad cost that you found with a lot of your customers there?
Yeah, great question. So keywords are also very interesting because of how they've changed over time. It used to be you would get a list of 1 million keywords, every different variation, misspelling, long tail, etc. And you could beat your competition because they didn't have those keywords, and Google was built to just, look at the keywords you entered in. Nowadays, Google is so much smarter that they're kind of viewing your keywords typically more as a guideline, put it that way, more as like, okay, this is what's relevant to them. Let me go and figure out all the different synonyms and variations and things that, I, as the algorithm, think are relevant to this keyword. And then it's a process of optimizing, adapting, adding negative keywords to cut waste, things like that. And so when we look at keywords now, it's less about building massive keyword lists. It's more about informing Google, giving them guidelines of here's what's relevant, here's what's not relevant. And looking at categories of keywords too. And so something like there's third-party tools such as SEMrush or SpyFu, which are very good at taking a look at your competitors and seeing, okay, well, what types of keywords are they showing up for, and comparing them to you. And often we'll find a category of keywords where we say, oh, didn't realize people search for something in that way, but that makes perfect sense. Let's go ahead and start targeting these keywords as well. And given that our competitors going after them, it's a good signal that they're probably working well because our competitors are spending money on that.
Cool. And I mean, what factors can actually help reduce these costs?
So the match type that you use for your keywords, kind of getting very into the granular side of things, is certainly going to impact. Sure. So Google has what they call exact match, phrase match, and broad match keywords. They used to have broad match modifier, but they sunsetted that. And those are basically you telling Google how much flexibility Google has in the search terms, the actual words people type into Google that would match the keywords that you've put into your account. So if you have an exact match keyword, you're telling Google, hey, we largely only want people who are searching for pretty much this exact phrase or word.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Google still has a lot of flexibility to go beyond that, what they call close variant matching, but they'll try and stay kind of relatively close to that. Whereas if you have a broad match keyword, you're telling Google, hey, there's a lot of flexibility. Go out and get lots of different things that you think are generally relevant to this phrase. And so typically what we'll find is, from a cost per click standpoint, exact match will often cost a little bit more than maybe broad match, kind of comparing them across data. But at the same time, with broad match, you're often going to get way more irrelevant traffic than you might with exact match because of how broadly Google is targeting. And so you can't just look and say, oh, our exact match keywords are more expensive than the broad match. You have to look at, well, are you wasting so much money on irrelevant search terms from broad match that if you actually cut that out, you'd still be having a better cost per acquisition from exact match, and do that kind of analysis.
Probably have less tire kickers, I guess.
Often, yes. Yeah. Especially if you figured out like, okay, these exact keywords, this is where the real good business comes from, and focus on that. Exactly.
Interesting. And so what's a project that you've worked on and it just blew away your expectations? Like something you just think, whoa, I didn't expect at all working with this company, let's say, or this product itself, and just blew away totally your expectations.
That is a great question. Let's see. What's a good example? One story I like to go to is a client that we've actually worked with for a number of years, but we switched them in 20, let's see, it was 2020. So not last year, but the year before that, in the middle of the pandemic and all sorts of fun stuff that was going on. We were able to kind of switch our advertising focus for them to what we call our profit narrative, a profit-oriented advertising strategy, where we really focused in on what was driving profit for them, which of their products. They're a e-commerce website that sell lots of different types of products, different categories of products. And we really dug deep into the data to see what was driving not even just initial orders and traffic, certainly, but what was driving profit for them. And then we actually were able to significantly cut our ad spend in Q4 of that year, I think by like 30-40% year over year, and still saw a significant growth in revenue and over 1,000% growth, I think, in profit, because we were able to weed out the things that just weren't working. And it was really exciting to see the profit numbers in there and be like, okay, year over year, over 1,000% increase. That's pretty sweet, especially because they were spending a decent amount the previous year. It's not like they went from 5 sales to 10 sales. They've been around for a while, and we were able to just massively increase that profit.
Right. And so, as a CEO, since your time in Stub Group, and then as an entrepreneur, let's say, can you share some advice that kind of forced you to learn while either growing the business, where you had to grow a team, or dealing with a difficult client? Something that, let's say, a person in your position that's probably starting out an agency, what would you say to them as giving a good advice, as something you learned, perhaps?
Yeah, a number of things come to mind. I think, especially for someone who is just starting out, figuring things out in the business side, there's a great danger in trying to do too much as a business, in saying yes to everything, and getting yourself into a position where you're just not doing a good job across many areas, because that's not your area of expertise. And you've said, yes, I can do that, but you don't know how to do it. And there's a balance there, because you need to be a solution for your clients. And certainly when you're just starting out, you're kind of figuring out, well, what am I going to be as a business? Which of these different areas, what do I do best at? And so you do have to say yes to a certain extent and kind of figure things out. But I've seen many scenarios where people just, especially in the agency world, they try to do too much too quickly, and they end up massively damaging their reputation as a business, because they've delivered shoddy work product to clients.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah.
maybe they were a really good SEO agency and they brought clients on board for that, but then they said, oh, we can do PPC as well. And then they sour the entire client relationship because they did a poor job in this other area that they never really should have entered to begin with. And so I would just say, really look, focus, I think, is important for a new business owner, for any business owner, but especially a new business owner, is focus on what's the best use of my time. What am I good at? How can I best leverage that for my clients and grow, conservatively.
Absolutely. And when someone looking at an advertising agency, as a potential customer, like what's probably been the errors that you've seen that, I guess you have clients that tried someone else before and think, oh, I used someone else and I wasn't happy. Mm-hmm. And perhaps what would be, even for listeners or viewers that are looking for an advertising agency, what would be perhaps some errors that they can avoid that you can suggest to us?
Yeah, there are, I think, a lot of red flags that you can look for when you're analyzing an advertising agency and whether to work with them. I think one important thing goes back to my last point of understanding what are their core competencies, especially if they're saying we're a full service agency or we do all these different things. Really dig in and figure out, do they have expertise in all these things or not? And maybe they could be great at SEO, for example, and you should hire them as their SEO agency, but maybe you should look for a different vendor who specializes in PPC. So I think asking questions, asking, hey, how many team members do you have in these different areas? What's been your experience? Do you have case studies or testimonials you can provide from other clients that you've done these services for? I think all of that's important. I think also when evaluating pricing, I see a lot of advertisers, they're just looking for the cheapest price, the cheapest cost. They're saying, okay, how can I save money on my monthly management fees? And I understand that, but that's the wrong approach to take, frankly, because you typically end up with what you pay for, as with most things in life. And you end up not only, yes, you might be saving a little bit on your management fees per month, as opposed to working with another agency that charges more, but you end up wasting so much in wasted ad spend because those people aren't as good at managing your ads, or missed opportunity because they're not really invested in helping you grow and figure out new channels to test, new strategies to test, that you think you're saving money, but you're actually losing way more money than you're saving. And eventually you end up going to an agency that's more expensive anyway, because you had such a terrible experience. So I would say, don't always go for the cheapest option out there, because again, you get what you pay for.
Sure. And last question I probably have is, who's been an inspiration either as an entrepreneur or as a marketer in your life to do what you do today?
Yeah, for me personally, the two founders of Stub Group, who I came on board with as employee number one back in the day, they have both been very instrumental in helping me grow my understanding of business and in my role currently as CEO of Stub Group. And they both come from long marketing business backgrounds, and so are able to provide a lot of expertise, a lot of insights into how do you best structure cash flow? How do you best structure your company for success? What do you look for in hiring the right talent? How do you deal with clients who are a problem? Which clients should you stop working with because they're not profitable use of your time? So many things that go into running a successful business, and they've been, I think, hugely instrumental for me.
Awesome. John, appreciate your time. It's been a wonderful chat. I hope you enjoyed. And if listeners and viewers want to find out more about Stub Group and yourself, where they can go and find you?
Yeah, best place to find out more info is our website, stubgroup.com. You can see case studies, blog articles, all kinds of fun stuff on there. And then also, if you're looking for help with your own business, we'd love to chat with you. You can reach out through there and we'll do a free evaluation of current advertising you're doing, or help you kind of benchmark and do some market research if you're just getting started, and see if we'd be a good fit to help your business grow online.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks again, John. Nice seeing you. And speak to you soon.
Take care.